Hi guys, welcome to Comic Review. Hi guys, so today I'm going to talk about this comic called Cassata. This is a independent comic by a group of artists called Yum Comics. So from what I understand, they are like a bunch of students from the same college. So they came together to start this indie comic distribution thingy. And this is their first work. And Cassata is basically an anthology. Let me check my notes. Yes. So Cassata is basically an anthology of 6 stories written by 6 different comic artists. There are actually 3 other different shorter bonus comics, like a single page bonus comic written by 3 other artists. But the main focus of the book are the 6 stories that you can read. So I'm going to talk about each of these stories, but in a bit of a random order. The first comic is called Wheels by Sania Pazivas. I don't know if I pronounced that right. So this comic is kind of a goofy take on the hustle culture, and it kind of looks at it from a different humorous angle, and it basically is a satire. You go through the protagonist whose main objective is to be as lazy as possible, in the hopes that for some reason he believes being more lazy will help him get a better job, better pay. And there's a funny reason behind it. And him doing weird shit, slowly progressing his levels of laziness is really fun to read. And eventually, he keeps getting lazy. Eventually, it leads to something super drastic, super crazy. Book is a fun satire on the entire concept of constantly pushing yourself to the greatest extent and always seeking growth and success. So it was a fun read, and I love the goofy art style. It's a very short read, and you'll have fun throughout it. Okay, so the second story I want to talk about in this book is called The Booth Club. It is actually written by Vatsal Bucha. So, of all the comics in this, I loved this art style a lot because of how consistent and unique it is. Usually, like when a new artist tries to experiment with this cool style, it is kind of not consistent, but somehow Vatsal pulls it off. And consistently, you can see that the style remains the same. And I love how he uses colors. Like it's predominantly black and white, but little hints of like a grayish purple. And I loved it. The story is a bit all over the place. It's about these bunch of friends who are trying to figure out ways to kill their time, and they eventually come together to create the Booth Club. What it is basically they come together and talk about paranormal stories like ghost stories, supernatural stuff, and also they kind of go explore stuff. That is the premise of it. But using that premise, the writer and the artist kind of explore some existential questions, which is really cool. But at the end of the day, this comic is very vague. This particular story is very vague and leaves you in an ambiguous ending, which was kind of cool. The next comic I want to talk about is Tethered by P. Versha. This was one of the most beautiful comic in this whole bunch. It deals with so many topics, so many themes, so many beautiful themes of memory, you getting forgotten, death, and it uses science fiction. I mean, not science fiction, fantasy in a really beautiful way. And this is the first comic that is quite philosophical, as in it tries to question a lot of things and explore a lot of human existential thoughts, and it's done beautifully. And I freaking love the art style. It's very how do I put it? It's boxy, but it is so unique. It has a flow in itself, and the color scheme is just so perfect. Throughout the comic, it just blends really well. And even though the artist uses both warm and cool tones, it doesn't contrast too much because they're kind of in the muddy range. So it works beautifully for the dream-like kind of spiritual uh, experience. So I loved the story. It was one of my favorite reads in this, and it's also one of those stories that you think about a lot after you read it. So it's a great work. Okay, so the next story is called Playmate, and it's by Malhar. Playmate by Malhar. Dude, I loved this book. So one of the things about this book that immediately caught my eye is the art style. It's one of the most unique art style I've seen in this entire book. Again, that's the beauty of Cassata because it shows a wide, diverse range of art styles from 6 different artists. Actually, 9 if you include the bonus comic. This art style, especially the way in which the colors and textures has been used, this is my favorite art style of the bunch immediately. When you talk about horror, the artist that comes to my mind immediately, especially when I'm relating it with this comic, is Junji Ito. And usually, when people adapt Junji Ito, they usually try to adapt his style of art rather than his style of storytelling. But I'm not sure if the author was inspired from Junji Ito or not, but the story feels very Junji Ito in essence. Even though the art style is very different, I could feel the horror, Junji Ito horror. And throughout the story, you meet two main characters. They are both good friends and they encounter something strange. They see a lady, and immediately one of the friend gets super panicked and they run away. Even though she looked pretty normal, she didn't seem harmful. But after that, they start like the other friend keeps asking questions. Bro, like, why did you run? Like, what was the big deal? Tell me. And that's when the story starts. And he starts explaining the past and stuff. And it is a very dark kind of twisted story, but it's also a bit goofy in a sweet and endearing way, but with a little bit of tone of creepiness. I loved it. When he draws the characters, there's something subtly uncanny about them. Like sometimes he draws characters with bulging eyes while having a normal conversation. But that's very creepy and it creates that atmosphere. Overall, the art style already builds a lot of creepy atmosphere, but also he adds to it with this insane expressions. So I loved reading this. Great job. Okay, so the next comic I want to talk about is called The Ghost of Fourth Floor. Yes, The Ghost of the Fourth Floor by Vatsal Bucha. This is the most complex and well structured story of all. Most of the other stories have a vague, ambiguous, open ended ending, but this has a good 3 act structure, a beginning, middle, and an end, and it's well structured with good build up and execution payoff. The first time when I started reading this story, it immediately reminded me of the old school Tinkle comics. And I had a very good time going through this. It's a lot of fun vibe. It has similar energy as to defective detectives from Tinkle, or maybe even stuff like Butterfingers. It's just characters having fun in the school. So it's a really interesting read. It is kind of nostalgic for me because this is the type of comic I personally grew up reading, particularly from Tingle, as I said. So it was a very fun read. This particular comic has an art style which is very boxy, angular, almost rigid, because at times when there is like a lot of dynamic scenes involved, the artist really does a good job of conveying dynamism through rigid and structured looking characters. That's a great accomplishment. And even though the story has a kind of a silly, goofy, fun ending, and you also almost feel like you almost predict it, it was very endearing to read. So I enjoyed that. It was a great, fun read. And again, stories like these are what I grew up with, so I always have a soft spot for this. Okay, so the next comic is called Hen or Chicken. My bad, Hen or Egg. Hen or Egg by Raja the Great. Dude, what a story. So it's very silly, it's very funny, it's goofy. If you know about this artist called Srish, he has a funny comic called Goti Gayab. And this particular story reminds me a lot of that. It has a lot of, wholesome charm to it. So the basic premise of the story is two people sitting in a bar having an argument over which came first, the hen or the egg. And they're having this back and forth until out of nowhere Gandhiji shows up, or maybe the spirit of Gandhi, and he gives his take on this. That's just the premise, and things go by in a very goofy and fun way. I enjoyed this right throughout. One of the comics that I had multiple laughs consistently throughout. So great job in that. And also this style, the art style. I don't know what it is about this art style, but again, the art style screams Tinkle to me. The golden era of Tinkle, early 2015 stuff, like maybe even much back, 2010s. So that style, I don't know how you captured it, but great job. I enjoyed reading it. So finally, there are three short bonus comics. I won't talk much about them, but they're just small snippets, 1 or 2 pages. They're just fun, almost like an interlude between these comics. So it's a great break. Even though you're taking break from comic with comic, it makes sense. It's great. So overall, I love this book, Cassata. And if you want to support these guys, want to buy their comic, I'll mention all the artists' Instagram pages in the comments. I mean, in the description, along with their Yum Comics page as well. So go check them out. And if you find this comic book interesting, you can maybe DM them and ask them for a copy, because that's how you get to support indie comic artists these days. So hope you enjoyed this video, and you can check out my other videos as well. So until then, see you next time.